The AI Kubernetes Show.
Hello, welcome to the AI Kubernetes Show, coming to you live from KubeCon in Atlanta. My name is William Chia. I will be your host as we uncover how the world of AI is changing the world of platform engineering. I'm very excited to have with us our guest, Curtis Cook, who is a platform DevOps engineer at Comcast, in addition to a contributor to the Deep Roots community group that is part of CNCF Merge Forward. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What's been exciting as we talk about all of the changes that have been happening in AI and how what's different now than it was 6 months, even 6 months or a year ago, is that the velocity and pace of code development has increased with the aid of AI tooling. Of course, this changes how platform engineers should respond to this. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what have you seen as a DevOps engineer in terms of having to deal with either greater code velocity or maybe not seeing the promise lived up to?
When you hear about more code, more often the first instinct is to think about speed, right? So, but with speed, you got to be careful because it can also run into chaos, right? So AI generated code is like hiring thousands of junior developers. They'll write a whole bunch of code, but you still need someone to make sure that it's secure, make sure it's compliant, make sure it's of quality, right? So at Comcast, we've been preparing for this wave by focusing on platform level controls rather than focusing on policing individual commits.
This is really interesting. The platform level controls versus policing individual commits. Is there any kind of examples that come to mind of, for somebody who is either, a software developer or coming new to platform engineering, what that might look like a platform level control versus like an individual policing?
I think a lot of times we go back to our lessons that we learned from other software changes. So if you think about Kubernetes, that taught us lessons that you don't scale by adding humans. You scale by automating the boring stuff and enforcing standards at the platform level. So we took that same mind frame with our approach to AI, and through that we were able to ship faster and to scale better, right? We developed programs that align AI adoption with business value and just responsible practices. But we're not chasing speed for the sake of speed, right? We're building a system with velocity and reliability so that it can coexist.
It's not chasing speed for the sake of speed, but what are the actual outcomes that you want to adopt, and putting those guardrails in place. One of the things that we have seen in this world, of course, when we start talking about guardrails, is that generative AI tooling, it can help us be more secure, but it can also introduce a whole new class of security vulnerabilities. AI is the new blast radius, so to speak. What are you seeing, in terms of, new threat surface area or vulnerabilities that we need to watch out for that we haven't experienced before?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. So when you introduce AI into workflows, especially chat LLMs, multi-agent systems, and autonomous pipelines, you're not just adding a feature, you're expanding the blast radius as well, right? The risk radius. So again, I like to draw from our past experience and think about what we did with Kubernetes. So if you think about it with Kubernetes, just one misconfigured RBAC policy can expose the entire cluster, right? So AI is similar in that mind frame, but the biggest difference is that this isn't just infrastructure level. This is actually making decisions. So you can find yourself in a heap of trouble if you don't make sure that your AI workloads are secure. Again, so at Comcast, we're treating AI like other critical systems. We're doing a zero trust by default mindset, right? So that means that we only use approved tools. We have guardrails baked into the SDLC, as well as strict isolations and making sure that privileges are set to least needed, I should say.
This is a theme we've heard a lot about, taking best practices that have been around for a long while, like least privilege access. One of the stories that came my way is, I was talking to an engineer here at the show, and they mentioned how you've probably experienced this problem yourself. You you import a MCP server into your local IDE, and it's implementing, it's got a few others that it adds in there. So all of a sudden it's tying up so much of your context. You have this context bloat. So what they started doing was rewriting the MCP server to only have access to 2 or 3 tools versus the 50. This kind of least privilege access mindset, but applying that into an AI world.
Exactly. And from that, what we see is that way you narrow the scope so that it gives you a better chance of avoiding things like hallucinations, where the AI will because it has too much variety to make the choice, it might give you some stuff that doesn't necessarily fit what exactly you're prompting it for.
This is a great call. If there are 100 options and you really only need 3 of them, then the chances that it can hallucinate 2 or 3 more get a lot higher versus just trying to pick from 2 or 3. It's also less context load on the model itself, so you can get a more reliable result.
Exactly.
This is a powerful way of moving forward. In terms of moving forward this way and changing our mindset, another topic we've been discussing is this idea of deterministic versus non-deterministic outputs. As engineers, we like functions. You put in a function, you get something out. It's reliable and consistent, but AI is anything but reliable and consistent. How have you been thinking about this idea of when you're working with AI and it's non-deterministic and you need to deal with this non-deterministic world?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. So this one is the most profound shifts, I believe, since migrating from bare metal to the cloud, right? So deterministic systems, like you mentioned before, you give input and you know what to expect for the output. So when you add the nine deterministic goal-based systems like those powered by AI, I mean, again, like we just mentioned with the model, based on whatever context it has, it could give you a different path of solutions to the same questions, right? So those changes for development and security and operations could mean, a lot of variables that you didn't foresee. Now, as far as some of the challenges, I believe with those, security is definitely going to be at the top of that list. Things like prompt injection, model drift, data poisoning, those are all real threats, right? And another one that I could think of off the top of my head would be like testing and validation. So with unit tests, it's like a if this, then that. You know what you're testing for, you know what data that you're expecting. But again, with the idea of a
non-deterministic
there we go, non-deterministic outputs, right? You really can't, it's hard to gauge for it. So you got to come up with newer ways to test for that. Thinking of ways off the top of my head, with things like strategies like statistical validation, confidence scoring on your responses, right? With those things, you can try to use those to mitigate the hallucinations that we're talking about earlier. And now, some of the benefits that I do see with this AI approach, of course, the biggest one is velocity. You can go faster. With that, you can get developers to get solutions faster. And within that, you can get more productivity because you get the time back, right? Another one that sits with me is the resiliency. So like with Kubernetes, if you have resiliency built in with the benefits, the largest one that I see is velocity. So again, developers could get the solutions faster, which translates into productivity. And then resiliency is another one that I see that as a big one. So when I think of it in terms of like Kubernetes, where having multiple paths is better than none. And with non-deterministic systems, you can have it set up where it has multiple paths so it can recover more gracefully because it has multiple options, right? Now at Comcast, we're making these shifts cultural as well as technical. We teach each teams to think in terms of guardrails, not gates. So Kubernetes gave us a declarative infrastructure where AI is giving us a declarative intent. Right? So the future is about controlling every step it's about, or I should say, it isn't about controlling every step. It's about defining the destination and building platforms that can get us there safely.
This is this is great stuff. We talk about the cyclical shifts in technology, and the new is old, old is new. So there's lessons that we've learned from the world of Kubernetes, guardrails, not gates. We can apply this type of mindset into the new world of, or the new technology that's coming down, and leverage the skills that we've built up in order to apply them to new challenges. I'm curious, how long have you been working with Kubernetes?
Yeah, so it's coming up on 7 years for me. Now it's been an interesting path. I initially started off as a mobile developer, and then transitioned into yeah. So
Mobile developer to Kubernetes engineer.
yeah, so it's very interesting. So even in the opening keynote, they had the Pokemon Go team gave a talk, and it's funny because I during my time of mobile development, if I ever ran into any hiccups or head scratching moments, I would go out and take a walk and often play Pokemon Go. So then I started looking into what was behind the back end of that, learned it was Kubernetes. And then as a member of my local Google development group in Philadelphia, they offered a course through, I believe it was Quark at the time. And I took a Kubernetes course, and from there I started looking for opportunity roles at different companies in my area. So,
That is such a cool story. I too was a big fan of Pokemon Go, and that mobile experience led you into this whole world of the infrastructure and the parts under the covers that make that experience work. And now you said this was about 6, 7 years ago,
yes, about 6.5 years ago, so 2018-ish.
and you entered into the Kubernetes world. If you can remember back to that time, what do you think made it easy to engage with the community? What do you think were some roadblocks or made things difficult?
I think one of the biggest things is just the open source community in general. So with everything being open source, I can go and look in the back end. If I had any questions, Stack Overflow was more like the place to go at that time. And then I can just go reach out to the community. So being that there was such a vast amount of members working on that project, there wasn't any shortage of people in the community that were willing to help, which is always a great thing.
And when you were coming in new to the community, did you find any things that were challenging or any difficulties as you were trying to come on board as a Kubernetes engineer?
Yes, I think the biggest for me was just mastering the fundamentals. So there's a lot to just starting at Kubernetes, right? Like, I mean, you would at least have to know some Linux, some networking information or fundamentals would do you well. And just getting over those hurdles, I think, were my biggest slow me downs. But other than that, once I got past those, it was kind of like I hit the ground running.
You were a software developer, a software engineer on the mobile side, but in order to become a platform engineer, there were these additional capabilities, fundamental Linux knowledge, networking, and then you were off to the races.
Yes.
Well, now you are the veteran. You are the senior community member. And as you think about welcoming new folks in to open source projects, to the Kubernetes community more broadly, how do you think about your role in that as somebody who's been part of the community for a long time? The responsibility to welcome new folks in, or what can we do to make the community more inviting?
Yeah, just be open to people from different backgrounds. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed. And we do a good job at that here in the CNCF with the CNCF communities. Like mentioned before, I'm a member of the Deep Roots community, which is the BIPOC fork off of the Merge Forward main branch, I like to joke about. But we have about 7 different communities that are all part of different diversity groups. There's some for deaf and hard of hearing, blindness, the LGBTQ group as well. I know there's one for stuttering and neurodivergency. So we have a lot of bases covered, and it's just great that you can come to events like QCon, and they have sessions in place for you to join, and you can meet with that community. So you should never feel like you're alone. Now we're more inclusive than ever.
What do you think it's like for folks that are trying to come into a new community like Kubernetes, maybe from mobile development, trying to understand networking, Linux fundamentals, these kinds of things. If something like Merge Forward was absent, what would that world look like if there was no BIPOC deep roots group, no LGBT group, no neurodiversity group?
Right. So right now, what I would recommend for someone, if we had that hypothetical situation, I would recommend try to mix in something like AI, right? So one of the fun projects that I worked on recently was trying to make sense of the CNCF landscape.
Okay.
So if you go on that page, there's 200 plus projects, and it's cool because if you put all of these together, you can form Voltron or some type of big robot, right? And make something cool. But how you get there is always challenging, right? So what I did was I created a context that LLM that only had the information from the CNCF sites. And what I did was create a chatbot that I could create a journey selector. So if you go in and you say, I created this software and I want to run it and say like a PaaS, what CNCF tools would you recommend? And it could spit out an output of that and give you step-by-step instructions on how to get that up and running. So I would recommend maybe toying with some of those type of technologies where you can ask it, I'm trying to learn Kubernetes. What are some of the best practices that I could follow? What are some of the first things that I should look into learning and mastering before diving headfirst into Kubernetes? Because it's a big world with Kubernetes, right?
I love this. There's no substitute for human interaction. Walking, as you mentioned, when you walked in and there was open networking sessions where you were there with people that you could have face-to-face communication. Nothing beats this. But if you find yourself in an environment where that's not offered to you, maybe it's not as dynamic of an organization like CNCF is. What options are available to you? Well, AI that you can leverage, building your own tooling to help you understand the world is a way that you can help it out for yourself. And then I can even imagine this journey path chatbot is not something that's just helpful for you, but could be helpful for many people.
Right. Yeah, and also you reach out to people like me in the community. I'm always open to speak. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest place to find me. But also I would recommend places like meetups, because a lot of times there's local events going on and people who share those same interests in your community that you may not be aware of.
Well, it's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show. You mentioned folks finding you on LinkedIn. For folks in the community that do want to keep up with you, what are the places online that they should connect with you?
Sure, you can find me at Curtis M. Cook on LinkedIn, as well as Curtis M. Cook on Twitter. Those are probably the top two places to find me.
Excellent. We will put those links in the show notes. And Curtis, it's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Created by the team at buoyant.io.